Welcome back to React Native Radio Podcast. Brought to you by Syntax Errors. Come on, you know what I meant. Episode 185, Navigation with Graham Mendick.
Hey everyone, welcome to the React Native Radio Podcast, where we explore React Native together. I'm your host, Jamin Holmgren. Today, I'm joined by my co-hosts, Harris and Robin. Aditi couldn't make it today, and we get to play the fun little game, Where is Harris in the World Today? Harris, where are you at?
I'm still in Vancouver for this week. Next week, I'm going back to Montreal. So
okay, all right. Now, heads up, by the way, you'll probably be listening to this in the new year, but there's a little bit of a delay because we are not going to be releasing or recording for the next couple of weeks over the Christmas break. Yeah, awesome. Well, how are you, Harris? Anything new in your life?
I'm good. Going for a hike tomorrow. It's going to be raining, but we'll see. So otherwise...
I swore up and down I was going to keep up my new hiking hobby when we got into winter. And I have made a few hikes, just not in the last 3 weeks. So I'm kind of slacking off a little bit, but hopefully I can get back to it. It's definitely raining here.
Did you get cold weather, rain hiking gear? There's a whole set of gear you need once it's cold and raining.
I did after the first time I went in the cold and rain and snow. I was up there in shorts and hiking shoes that just got soaked through. And yeah, I look like a complete noob up on the mountain. I didn't actually go all the way up, and I was like, okay, this is not good. And I went back. Next time I went up, I had better, more proper gear, and I brought my son Cedric with me, and we went all the way to the top of Silver Star Mountain, which is an awesome mountain here in Southwest Washington. So actually, just saying that makes me want to go up there. Maybe I'll do that.
It's funny. You take up hiking. You're like, it's hiking. They're the mountains are free. And
right.
Then you realize you're hiking in the Pacific Northwest, and it gets
the
to be a really expensive hobby really quickly.
From Amazon and elsewhere. Yes, that's totally what happens. So, Robin, how are you, by the way?
Oh, I'm doing good. We're just preparing for a quiet COVID Christmas.
Quiet COVID Christmas. That sounds like the name of an album or something.
Maybe there will be some albums next year. Quiet.
I don't think I'll buy it.
Christmas, yeah. I'll skip that one.
With us today, we also have a special guest, and his name is Graham Mendick. He's the author of Navigation, which is the data-first JavaScript router. He has a PhD, which he told me not to say, from Leeds University. He lives in Reading, just outside of London. He works in London. How are you doing, Graham?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, what was your PhD in again?
Maths. But I did
math. Yeah, so
I did tell you not to say.
And do you use that? Do you use that much now?
No, I don't think I've ever used math since then.
As a fellow math degree holder, I can attest to not using it even a little bit.
Yeah, I forgot it all.
Well, I don't have a math degree, and I also don't use it, so I can pretty much say I'm a PhD now, right?
Nice.
just don't call yourself Dr. Jamin. Come on.
Dr. Jamin. Our topic today is going to be a really cool open source library by Graham. I'll talk about that in a bit, but I want to say that this episode is sponsored by Infinite Red. Infinite Red is a premier React Native design and development agency located fully remote in the USA and Canada with years of React Native experience. We've been doing this for a very long time. I think around 40 or 50 years, right, Robin? Something like that?
A long time in the JavaScript world, which is, 4, 5?
5, since it came out, basically. And deep roots. We also have deep roots in the React Native community. We are the hosts of Chain React, the conference, and we publish the React Native newsletter. Infinite Red is the best choice, if I may say so myself, for your next React Native app. Hit us up, hello@infinite.red. You can email me directly, jamin@infinite.red. If you have complaints, email them to harris@infinite.red. You can learn more on our website, infinite.red. Okay, so let's talk about this library. This very interesting library, actually, that is also extremely ungoogleable. The name is Navigation. So we have React Native Navigation. Then we went to React. Oh wait, no. Let me start over.
Yeah, we have React Navigation and React Native Navigation.
But there's also React Native Router Flux, React Native Navigation, React Navigation, and Graham's just like, you know what? Let's just go Navigation. Yeah. We're just going to keep it simple here. So the name is Navigation. We will put a link to it in the show notes, so you don't have to try to Google it. Let's talk about this. It's an open source library. It's obviously about navigation. It's kind of in the same realm as React Native Navigation and React Navigation. You wouldn't use both on a project. You'd choose one. So let me ask, just to start things off, what was sort of the thinking behind building your own navigation library?
So it started out as a router just for React, really, and I built that many years ago. I saw a lot of other React routers. They were starting to say that they supported React Native too. So that got me interested in seeing if my navigation router would work on React Native too. And that was a few years ago now. It took me like 3 years really to get it to support React Native. That was like a big journey. So, I had no native experience before that. I just set out just to see what it could do. And so on that 3-year journey, that's taken me to now I've got it working on React Native. And it is like you say, it's a competitor against React Navigation and React Native Navigation. And it is hard to separate them from the names, like you said.
What were some of the biggest challenges in going from just JavaScript to supporting native?
Yeah, so luckily, when I started out, I didn't know the challenges because I think it would have deterred me. But so all I was doing at first was just trying to get it to run on a React Native, just seeing if it worked. But really, that's when you start to see there's big differences between the web and native. And one of the biggest differences is there's a stack of screens on native, and you don't have that on web. And once you start looking at the stack, so the first thing that I did was to try and implement that stack in JavaScript. That's the most normal thing you do. And I think a lot of libraries do that. Like the early version of React Navigation was just a JavaScript stack before React Native Screens came along. Yeah, so I implemented the stack first of all in JavaScript, but then you see that's not really satisfactory because you start to find out about native and native obviously have their own stack, right? That's where it's implemented on the native side. So you don't compromise on all the animations run on the native side. And what I was doing was I was implementing JavaScript where all the animations run on the JavaScript side. So it doesn't look like a real native app and it doesn't feel like a real native app. And also you get these problems with slowness, like the animations are slow. And so that's when I started moving to native and started learning about native. So I hadn't done any of the native first. So I sort of left React Native behind and just dived into looking at how to build native apps. So I learned the Xcode platform and I learned the Android Studio platform and how to build native apps. And that's when I realized what the native components were. So on Xcode, it's like a UI view controller. And on Android Studio, it's like fragments or activities. And then that's when I started to get into the native side. And so the next iteration of it was moving all that stuff to the native side and using the native primitives that are part of the navigation libraries.
Yeah, so I actually wasn't aware that it started as a web router originally. So you were using it on the web, and obviously you must have a different philosophy on that side. There are no native stacks there. How does it work on the web side of things?
Yeah, so it is very different from any of the other routers you might have encountered with React. That's what I would say. And the best way of describing it is it's page-based routing. So all the other routers that I've seen are route-based routing. So if you think of React Router, you specify your route and, and that's where it does it. That's where it renders your pages. But with the navigation router, it's all page-based routing. So what you get is you get a flat configuration. So for each page you've got in your app, you just have one row in your configuration. So if you've got 10 pages, you've got 10 rows. And what you do is you say the page you want to go to and the data you want to pass. And that's all you say. And then you let the navigation router work out all the complexity for you. So it builds your URLs for you. It passes strongly typed data. And that I think is what Next tried to do, right? Next tried to be file-based routing, but then it got complicated once they had nested routes and they started to have nested files and subdirectories. But like what you want is you want that flat configuration structure. And even when you introduce nested routing, you still want your structure to stay flat. So the way that I've done it is like, you can think of it as each page has an array of routes. So if you have to support a nested route structure, you still want your configuration flat, but you specify both the top level route and the nested route at that page level.
Ah, interesting. So you're really basing it on the page itself, and then each route is just a property, so to speak, or it's an array, like you said, and you can host that page on a number of different locations.
Yeah, I mean, the routing, first of all, you specify the pages, and you don't even need to specify any routes, right? What the navigation router will do, it will generate routes for you, just some dummy routes, just so that you can start navigating. So you don't even need to specify. You just say, I want this page and I want to pass this data, and the navigation router will generate everything, URLs and everything. They're messy URLs because it's just generating them to get you going. And then once you've finished your pages and you're navigating, you say, I actually want this really beautiful URL to look like this. And you don't have to change any code at all. It just updates, everything updates, and all your URLs are just exactly as you want.
It makes a lot of sense to me. It's like, because the web routing is sort of left over from when web pages were just like pointing to various places in a file structure on a server somewhere. But we have these single page apps now, which are not structured like that. So it makes sense to just build your app the way it makes sense and then make the URLs fit your app rather than trying to build your app around a nested URL structure that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, exactly. And it still supports a nested URLs or nested routes if you want them at the end. You just have to configure, both. And there's a short syntax for it. So although I said you configure an array of routes, but it's actually a nicer syntax than that. And it's also much more how native works, right? You don't have this, you just say the screen you want to go to, right, on native. You don't have any of that complexity. So why do you need that complexity on the website as well? I think people just got used to it.
It's just like how it's always worked. And so we've been sort of shoehorning the new single page apps into the old routing ways.
I do hope, if the guy from Next, Guillermo Roach, if he's listens to any of this or something, if he looks at the navigation router, it would fit so perfectly for Next. And I have written something about it and tried to reach out to him, but it's very hard if you're not a celebrity to get any attention, isn't it? But, it would just be perfect for Next.
If you're listening, reach out to Graham.
Well, you're a celebrity now that you're on this podcast.
Yeah. We're all celebrities. I can't go anywhere anymore.
Right. So going back to the native side, because obviously this is the React Native podcast, React Native Radio podcast. We want to talk more about the React Native side of things. You went with native navigation, and what were the benefits of doing that over just building it in JavaScript?
I'll explain how I think about React Native and then sort of come back to the question. So React Native promises that you can use React and you'll end up with a native app that looks and feels exactly the same as if you built it using Xcode. That's the promise of React Native, right? That it's using the same native primitives. So a native primitive is like the widget. So the same button, the same text input as you get if you're building it with a real native app. And so that's and I think that is true, but it's only true if you cover up the edges of your phone. That's the way I say it. It's right, the top and the bottom edges and the right and the left edges. Because in the middle of the screen, React Native does give you the same primitives, but it doesn't give you the same primitives. A lot of the primitives live on the edges of the screen, right? And they're the navigation primitives, right? So for example, if you're building a native iOS app in Xcode, then when you navigate to a new screen, iOS automatically slides the screen in from the right edge of the screen. And if you're popping the screen off, then you drag from the left edge of the screen. And those things happen automatically, right? Not every iOS developer has to build that into their app. That's just automatic. That's automatic because you're using Xcode. And so you want those same native primitives that live on the right and the left edge for you when you're building your native app with React Native, because that's the promise, right? And that's the same as there's primitives at the bottom of your screen, like the tab bars. They're the native primitives at the bottom, and the navigation bar is the native navigation primitive at the top of your screen. So the more I started learning about React Native and what it's designed to do, then you realize you don't want to write everything in JavaScript. What you want to do is you want to write it in, you want the developer to render it with React components, but you want it to actually render to the native primitive on both the platforms so that you don't compromise on user experience.
Yeah, that's a really important piece.
Yeah, I really hate it when apps remove those like UX considerations that we're used to, right? Like if I can't swipe back using the edge of the screen, that really bugs me.
It breaks the user's trust in the UX because you, as an iOS or Android user, you get used to what the UX conventions are, and it can be really frustrating to try to swipe right to go back because that's just sort of ingrained now, and to have it not work.
And there's a lot more primitives than that. So the swipe is so important, but the primitives, like I say, on the tab bar, if it doesn't have the native looking tab bar, it just doesn't look like a native app. And if it doesn't have the native header, because like when you're swiping right, there's a lot of header animation that goes on, like especially on iOS where like the title sort of animates in and with large titles as well as it animates up. There's a lot of stuff going on, and all that is free. If you're just building a native app, it just comes free with UIKit. And similarly on Android, there's a lot of just native stuff that's free, like the tab bars, the way they animate when you click them and stuff like that. All those are native primitives, but React Native doesn't provide them. It doesn't try to provide them, it just tries to provide the native primitives for the middle of the screen. And that's where the navigation library should come in and fill in those navigation primitives around the edge of the screen. So that's what the navigation router tries to do.
I'm curious, just going back to, it's kind of what Jamin asked, but I'm not sure I fully understood, in the sense like, were you not, when you started navigation, did you look at the current routing solutions and were you like not satisfied, or did you just want to write your own navigation library because you wanted to experiment?
Yeah, I think so. I was quite frustrated with my web router not taking off. I was finding it hard to so what I do is I do a burst of development, then I try and talk about it, and then I get depressed because nobody reads the stuff I write or anything like that, or I can't ever communicate the ideas. That's why I really appreciate this opportunity. So I was in that state. I just done some web development. I was feeling a bit down because I talked about it, nobody has read it. So I thought, okay, I'll just try something else and try and look at React Native. So it wasn't like I was thinking I could build the best React router for React Native or anything. I just wanted to try React Native at that time. But then gradually, as I learned more about it, I saw the gaps with the existing routing solutions. And remember, this is before even React Native screens. So there really was nothing out there that even tried to do this. I would say React Native navigation sort of had some native primitives, but it didn't have the React component interface, right? So there's two sides to it. You have to have the native primitives so you don't compromise on UX, but you also have to have the React components so you don't compromise on developer experience. Yeah. So there was really nothing at the time that I started in. I still say there's not really that apart from the navigation router that delivers both those UX and developer experience.
Do you think that React Native itself should have exposed these, navigation primitives, in your opinion?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. I think it did. If you go back to the beginning, I got into it later than the beginning, but obviously I've learned about the history of it as I've been doing it. So it did have a navigator iOS, and it did have a tab bar iOS. And that was in the early days when it was only iOS before the Android stuff came in. And so it did have them, and they were really solid controls. I thought they were really good, looking back at them, and they helped me enormously. When I was writing the tab bar and when I was writing the navigation, I looked back at them to help them. So they were very successful controls. So I do think it should have done that, but I'm not sure why it went away from that. When Android came in, why it didn't try to do that. And also it just seemed to go down the JavaScript route for navigation, very early on. So the Navigator iOS got abandoned. And I think then they had several goes, didn't they? Navigator Experimental or stuff like that came in. I'm not really sure why they abandoned it. Do you know?
When you look at something that's been more or less abandoned or pushed into the React Native community, which I was a part of that process. I was one of the first people on the core team to split out, a library, including The one I did was WebView into its own, community module. The answer to that is pretty much always because Facebook doesn't need it.
Right.
If Facebook doesn't need it, then they don't have as much of an incentive to keep it up to date or build new features that the community needs. And I'm not really blaming the core team of React Native for that or Facebook or anything. They're doing a great job of releasing amazing features and tools for us to work with as a community. And then we provide that on top of it. But I agree with you. Like in a perfect world, that router that came with it originally would have been fully developed out into a good solution that the community liked. Just didn't end up happening.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that it didn't end up happening, and because I think the strength, even going to React, right, they never tried to implement a router,
Right.
and they're very good about not advocating a router, although React router has basically become the router that people use. I think they don't advocate it. Yeah, de facto router. Yeah, they don't advocate it. They don't push it or anything, which I think is commendable, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the same as React Native. I really appreciate that they leave it out, but I think they do mention, unfortunately, on their navigation page, they do recommend the React navigation, which, like I've tried to raise. I think they should steer clear of recommending solutions,
Sure.
and I appreciate them saying that.
I do think that they get pressure from the other side, newbies coming in and saying, well, what do I use? How do I, do I just Google and try to make a decision? This is something where I feel like solutions like our Ignite, React Native Ignite CLI can be helpful because we have our infinite red stack, which does evolve, does change over time. We use it to spin up new apps ourselves. And so this is the stack we recommend, but it's not an official thing. It's not an official React Native core team thing. I do think the thing that seems to, and I'm kind of getting ahead of myself because I actually want to talk more about the open source marketing aspect of this. One of the things that has been sort of driving adoption of React navigation has been its interoperability with Expo and the ability to run it on web as well. But yours does that too on the web side of things. So that's kind of an interesting aspect of this.
Yeah, absolutely. It does run on web, and I'd say it runs on web more successfully than React navigation. Let me explain why. So it runs on web, as in you can use React Native web, and then you can get a single code base. And it will work on all three platforms without making any code changes. It'll run on Android, it'll run on iOS, and it'll run on web. But also, if you just wanted to build a web app and you didn't want the native side, you can use the navigation router for that. You don't have to build it with React Native, because what navigation router does, it provides a stack implementation for the web, basically. And you don't have to run React Native web to do that. It's just a stack implementation, right? Just a JavaScript stack. And so that's the advantage. You get to choose which one you want to do, and you can animate it, just as you would on Android, anything like that.
That's interesting. If I wonder, we're working, one of our big projects right now is a mobile app and a web app, and we're trying to get as much shared code as possible. But where it is diverging the most is at the navigation level, so we have React Router on the web and we have React Navigation on mobile, and we use React Native Web pretty extensively for a lot of our shared components. So now I'd be curious to see if we could sort of re-implement this strategy using the navigation router.
Yeah. I mean, I've got an example in the code base that does it from, it genuinely is a single code base, and it runs on all three platforms with no code changes. Just need a separate entry point for the web, and that's all. Yeah. And if you want to diverge, and have a different web for the desktop, then you just take out the stack, right? You don't necessarily want the stack running on the desktop, but you can still use the page-based navigation that I was talking about earlier, just for which is appropriate for the desktop. And just to go back to that Expo point, I did raise it with them, because occasionally, even though I'm not a celebrity, I can get comments back from, if you try hard enough. And I did complain a little bit to Expo, saying I think it's a bit unfair that they package React navigation in Expo, because so the navigation router doesn't need any dependencies. It doesn't need any installation steps. If they package the navigation router inside Expo, people could then choose which one they wanted to use, or at least make it open. But I can understand, it's a different thing.
Expo is a little different. They obviously, the way that they operate, they have to prepackage the the native side of things into their binary, into their code base, and you're stuck with what you get. If you don't want something, you still get it. If you do want something, you don't get it. That is, I think, changing. I think that is going to change in the future. I think they have some ways that you can maybe write some custom code and include it in an Expo, even a managed Expo app, like one that's actually built by their servers.
Without having to eject.
Yeah, without having to eject, exactly. So they're doing some interesting things, and maybe in the future, Graham, you'll be able to have some interoperability with Expo apps. I think that'd be pretty cool.
That would be cool.
Let's talk about the open source marketing aspect of this, because you've mentioned this a few times that it's been hard to find, to get adoption. And I can identify with this. Believe it or not, I wrote a navigation library in the past.
Not for React Native, but
it was not for React Native. I wrote it for a platform or a tool chain called RubyMotion, I was a Ruby developer for many years, and it came out in around, I want to say 2012, I think, was when that came out. It allowed you to write, this was before the Swift days. So everybody was using Objective-C to build iOS apps. Now, basically, you could use Ruby and it would compile down using the Objective-C runtime into native code. It would actually, you were writing Objective-C, but in Ruby. The big thing there was, we started using it, and I quickly found out, okay, I don't want to have to, build all of my own view controllers and navigation, from scratch every single time I build an app. Let's build an abstraction over the top of it. I'm a Rails developer. I like things to be clean and nice. So I built this thing and I called it ProMotion, which I thought was a clever, play on the name of RubyMotion. And you would promote a screen onto the, whatever. I had some sort of a explanation for this. And it was as, or even worse, Googleable than your library navigation. So I totally get that.
Try Googling the word ProMotion.
ProMotion, exactly. Promotion is like a marketing term. It's
how to get your next promotion. Here are 5 tips.
Just download your next promotion from GitHub. So I have it right there. But so I was a little frustrated because I put it out there. It was one of my first open source projects. And I thought, hey, you just put it on GitHub, people are going to find it and use it. It's really cool. And I was getting nothing. And there was another one out there that wasn't as good, that was getting some adoption. And I think I was kind of in your shoes in a lot of ways. And I ended up emailing the guy who made RubyMotion and said, hey, I've been, kind of having trouble marketing this. I think it's pretty cool. And he's like, okay, well, just write a blog post and we'll put it on our RubyMotion blog as a guest post. Because he was looking for content anyway. And so I did that, and it hit the front page of Hacker News. And it just went off. And yeah, I got 1,200 stars, even though, back in those days, that was actually quite a bit. Nowadays, 1,200 is okay, but it's not crazy. But back in those days, that was a big deal. And then I got invited to speak at the conference, their second conference, I think, in San Francisco. And that led to all kinds of other opportunities, including this. The Infinite Red. Yeah. So that was really cool. It was open source was the open world, and it was a navigation library. It literally was navigating using the native primitives. It was all iOS to start. And then I did build an Android version later. And then we integrated it into a larger thing that was sort of Rails-like. So I get what you mean. And it was sort of, just kind of being persistent about it and not being afraid to send an email to people and getting in the right place at the right time. That kind of led to that. And also there was a need, there was a need for that. I do think there's aspects of it where people are well, it might be better, but the cost of change is also there. And not just the cost of change, but also the ecosystem, the documentation, the Stack Overflow questions, whatnot. Building a open source community is a lot of work. I've done it many times. I'm in the process of doing it again with MobX State Tree right now, in terms of, rebuilding that. So I definitely hear what you're saying. Having a memorable name can be helpful for sure. And so that might be something you struggle with a little bit with the name, just navigation. You might want to have something that's a little more memorable for that. And naming things is hard, as we all know. Yeah. But that could be something that just, because if because people get confused between React Native navigation and React navigation already.
Yeah.
And so
I still do.
kind of breaking free of that.
I couldn't tell you.
Someone was looking at, I don't remember who. Was it you, Harris, who suggested Navitron?
No, that was not me.
That was not you? Okay. Someone was saying Navitron. I don't know. Maybe it's already out there. I haven't even Googled it. But that can be an aspect of this. I think that consistently putting out content about it, writing blog posts and, doing video screencasts of, hey, this is how you do this with, navigate my navigation library. This is how you do it. You give talks. Talks are amazing for this. They really, really, conference talks, of course, in 2020 doesn't work so well, but as we move into the new year, hopefully there will be some conferences opening up and you can do virtual conferences as well.
We should have Graham do a guest post on Redshift.
Oh, that's not a bad idea.
I'll be well up for that.
We have a pretty good audience over there. A lot of React Native developers.
Nice. Thanks for all those tips. Yeah, I mean, I'm not good at the promotion side, definitely not. But I have tried a lot of things. So, like 1 year, I spent. I just applied to every conference, every React conference. I just applied. I wrote what I thought was really good abstract. It was about explaining about the stack on the web. So I was saying how you could get a native app basically running on the web, right? That's what everybody wants to do, isn't it? PWAs, progressive web apps are a thing, and nobody's really done that. I thought so. I just applied to every React conference, but I got rejected from every one, and I could see none of them really looked at the project as well, because you can see the traffic, and so I could see nobody was really even looking at it. So I just get a feeling it's kind of if you've got a new idea, you have to be a celebrity. That's my feeling. I know you managed it, and that's amazing. But I think if you're talking about somebody else's idea, you don't have to be a celebrity for that. You'll get onto conferences with somebody else's idea. But if it's a new idea, I just feel you have to be a bit famous for that. But I don't know.
It is interesting. I know as a conference organizer myself, we try to give voices to people who don't have big audiences and whatnot. I think there's an element of if we bring in someone with, 20,000 Twitter followers, then they'll bring in ticket sales. And that's kind of this, sort of overly, maybe capitalistic way to look at it. We try not to do that so much. We have a pretty good voice in the developer community that we've worked really hard to get, I would say, putting out a lot of content over the years. But I'll tell you, I had 2,800 followers on Twitter prior to going on a big 1 year speaking tour of, wherever I possibly could. And I grew to 10,000 in that year. So speaking definitely helps, and it doesn't take too many to get there. You can start with meetups. Meetups always need people. They're really, really, hungry for content. And then you can move forward from there. I definitely won't say that there wasn't an element of luck, and certainly, the connections that I had made a big difference. Being connected to Gant Laborde, I'll just say is a big deal when you want to be a speaker. Gant knows everybody, and everybody loves Gant, and Gant is one of my business partners. So, that's a pretty big advantage. Definitely don't give up. There's definitely there are speaking opportunities out there. And
it's like being an actor. You hear actors talk about eating ramen for 10 years and then the
overnight
break,
success.
The break comes along. And
you also have to be careful what you wish for, because when you become more popular, people start nitpicking everything. You have to grow a thick skin, and it's not easy because you're still the same person you were before you get a bunch of Twitter followers.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I don't think I'd be able to cope with it, but I just want to see what would happen, But also I do appreciate the meetup thing, because I do get into meetups. I applied for a couple of meetups, and they just want people to speak, don't they? So I got into that. Yeah. But I just find most of the audience is recruiters. So, it's quite hard to
It's true. It's true. Which is maybe why no one goes to meet. Is that why no one goes to meetups anymore? It's because they know the audience is all recruiters.
Can I just take a moment and talk about how absurd this is, that you would not want to go somewhere because there are tons of people offering you jobs? We're such a privileged group of
people who have
in this
jobs.
Industry. Yeah.
Well, talking about jobs, I take career breaks sometimes to work on the navigation router, right? Because it's very hard to work on it when you're working. right? And
Oh, yeah.
I'm a bit older, so I saved up some money. I lived off my savings for a bit. And I just did that for when I was converting it to React Native, right? I took a couple of years off, right? And so at the end of that, I was looking for work, right? Obviously, and I thought, oh, I know, I'll apply for React Native jobs because I've just been doing that. I learned Objective-C, I learned the platforms and all that, but I couldn't get a React Native job because I didn't have any commercial experience. So I just couldn't get anywhere. So I just had to get a React job in the end.
Do what I did and get a job for Elixir and then have your boss tell you to learn React Native on the job.
We used Elixir, not intentionally, but we used Elixir to bring in Robin and also Brian.
The funny thing is, I didn't know Elixir either, and I still got it. You still hired me. I don't know why.
Well, you did Ruby. I mean, close enough.
It's true. You hired me for Ruby, and I did that for maybe 2 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, we used to do a lot of Ruby. We still do a fair amount of Ruby, but it's mainly like a individual team that's doing that right now.
Maybe something you could consider is hiring a marketing consultant because sometimes they can really help you, like look at the messaging. Sort of if I look at the README of your repo, I guess the first thing that comes after me is that it doesn't really tell me the why, right? So you're telling me that it's a data first router and that other libraries have it backwards. And when I listen to you talk here, I can understand that. But if I look at your README, it doesn't actually explain to me why. Then there's always this like sort of golden use case, right? I think should always be in the README front and center. Like what is like 10 times easier using my library than other libraries, and put that front and center. I think those two things would help a lot.
Nice. Thanks very much.
That's fantastic advice. Harris will send you an invoice.
Graham did not know that when he signed up to come on this podcast that it was going to be... READMEs are very hard to do, especially if you're the one who implemented the library. Oh, yeah.
What's interesting
so
is for promotion, I kind of did README driven development. I actually wrote the README that I'd want to see, and then I made a library that conformed to that. Now, of course, some things didn't work technically, so I had to but it was sort of backwards from what you would normally do, where you would implement something and then try to describe it in the README. And I really kind of did it more the opposite, where I wrote out the API that I wanted and kind of, tried to show the cool, use case. If you actually go to the promotion README, you can immediately see, like it says iPhone apps Ruby style. It's like bringing Ruby sensibilities to that world. And then it shows some code that looks very pleasing, like, okay, here are your screens and you can just type in onload open root screen. So those are types of things I really think READMEs are very, very important, even more important, in my opinion, than a homepage. I actually think READMEs are critical. That's where developers like to look.
Right. I think I kind of abandoned my homepage. Once I started writing the documentation, I just never really updated it. So that's great.
Yeah.
Great for those tips. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So one thing I wanted to check in with you on, I saw a pull request by someone in the community that added detox testing to your library. So, how does that work now with your library? Is detox kind of a first class citizen at this point?
Yeah. So, I really I don't get like a lot of pull requests, but everyone I really appreciate. And that was an amazing one. So, anybody that wants to send me a pull request, much appreciated. But yeah, that was from Alex Lockhart, and he basically it was adding test IDs. Everything that's clickable, everything. So the tabs, the buttons in the navigation bar, all those kind of things, just making sure that they all had test IDs on them and they're recognizable to Detox and other Appium, I think, as well.
Yeah, I think that's important. You have to have that deep integration in order for people to really want to use your library. If we were to use the library and it didn't work with Detox, that'd kind of be a big blocker. So it's really cool to see that that's landed in your navigation library.
Yeah, and it was a lot of work. These pull requests are a lot of work. He just did it all himself mostly. I mean, we had a good chat about it all, but I really appreciated that. And I would say, even though I don't get that many pull requests, I kind of think that I've got the biggest people working on the biggest team of people working on the project, right? The reason I'll explain why, like, because I'm using the native primitives, right? Like, so I'm using all the native primitives from iOS and native primitives from Android Studio. I think of the UI kit as working on the navigation router, the team. And I think of the Android Studio team as working on my navigation router. Because anytime they improve those controls, right, my navigation router automatically gets those changes. Like
for free.
Yeah, for free. They're all virtually free. I have to add a prop or something like that. I mean,
sure.
So one example is like badges on tab bars, right? So in UIKit, the tab bar controller's already got a badge, but the one on Android, there's 2 tab bars on Android, actually. There's a bottom navigation view that goes on the bottom, and then there's a tab bar layout, the swiping one that goes on the top of the screen, and they didn't have badges. Then Android brought out a new version 1.1 of the material library, and they added badges to both the bottom navigation bar and to the toolbar layout. So my library automatically gets badges on Android, right? And they look just like the same native badges that you'd get if you were building a native app. So they're all working for my library, you know.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that attitude. That's fantastic. And I agree, because ProMotion had the same thing. If something new would come out, maybe it would break ProMotion, you know, for one day while I fixed it, and then I'd put it out there and we'd have it. And that was pretty awesome. I have a couple more questions for you. One is around TypeScript interoperability. Do you support TypeScript as a first-class citizen on the library?
Yeah, like it's all written in TypeScript as well. Like the examples aren't. So all the examples are in there are written in JavaScript just to make them more accessible. But like all the actual code, that's all written in TypeScript. So, generating the DTS is like, easy. I ship that as part of the library. I used to actually have it separate, and put it on definitely typed. And that was just so I could understand what the rules were around the TypeScript. Because if you put a pull request in definitely typed, they're all like correct all your typings, right? And they tell you how to write it properly. So I learned a lot by doing it off definitely typed, and now I brought them inside to make sure
That's a good pro tip.
That's a nice hack.
You want to level up.
No kidding.
Level up your TypeScript game.
Exactly.
My second question has to do with deep linking. This is one that we hit regularly with our apps. A notification comes in and we need to link to some screen that's not just, your home screen. Do you have sort of like a dedicated API to handle that? How would you handle deep linking in your case?
Yeah. So what you're saying is you want to go to something deep in the stack, right? So you want to open a screen, 3 deep, 4 deep, Yeah. So, what I would say is it's in your control. So that building the stack is in your control. It's not something. So the navigation route doesn't own the deep link. It doesn't own any of the navigation. That's all up to you. So you just listen to the deep link, just like you would if you were building React with React Native. You listen to it, and then to build the stack, you just instead of navigating, because what you don't want to do, say the link is 4 screens deep. You don't want to open screen A, then open screen B, and open screen D, right? You want to go straight to screen 4, and you don't want those 3 behind it to be rendered. You don't want them to render until you navigate back to it. So navigation route has this concept of fluent navigation. That's where you sort of do a lot of navigations in one go. So it's the same as navigating, except it's a fluent API. So instead of going navigate to screen 1, navigate to screen 2, you sort of just do all the navigations in one call, like chain them. And then once and then you build it, that gives you a URL in return. And then you just say navigate to that URL. And that URL basically contains those 4 screens. And it will jump straight to that 4th one. It won't render the others. As soon as you start popping back that 4th one, it will render that 3rd one.
Okay. So you still get all the benefits. You just don't have to wait for all of that to render. And that's very cool.
That's
I like
really
how that's handled.
Yeah. And fluent navigation is convenient for anything. So it's a lot of use cases for it. That's the obvious use case. But, say you want to go from, say you're on you've got 4 screens deep, but you want to change the screens in the history in the stack for some reason. People want to do that sometimes. You can just do it. You can just fluently navigate. So say you're on A, B, C, D, and you want to change it to A, B, E, D. You just fluently navigate to that link, and it will change. And it still won't render that screen behind it until you navigate back to it. It will just be waiting there.
That's really cool. And I suppose, would that be also helpful for like persisting your navigation state between loads of your app? If the app was swiped away and then you come back to the app, you don't want to necessarily start at the home screen. Maybe you were at a spot and you want to just pull that in from from your async storage. Is that another use case of the Fluent API?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's a really good use case. I mean, basically, the state of the stack is just a single URL. And so it's
That's
up to
really
you.
cool.
That's amazing.
It's actually a URL of URLs, if you want to think about it, because every screen is a URL, and the overall stack is just a URL with each URL in it. That's how it's done. So it's like, and so you can just listen to whenever it navigates. You just listen to that event and save that URL somewhere, and then you just navigate to that when it starts up if you want it to. We
should get you to help us with maybe like a Reactotron plugin, so that Reactotron and your navigation library can work, play well together. Maybe Reactotron could allow you to navigate around in your app, like from Reactotron or something like that. I love those types of, integrations between tools.
Yeah. I mean, I thought even like, I was thinking at one stage of building the Flipper integration, where you could like control the app and do that. And the obvious one is like a Redux integration, but I never did any of that. But totally. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Nice.
Very cool. Well, thanks so much, Graham. I know there's much more you could say about the library. There's a lot more here, but if people want to learn more about your navigation library, where can they go to find out about it?
I guess the best place is the repository, and we'll put a link to that in
we will
in the notes. Yeah. And you just asked me a question on there. I love getting questions. Like even if you feel like it's a bad question or it's anything, I just love answering questions. So ask me that. But if you don't feel like you want to ask a question on the repository, because I know some people don't want to do that, you can message me on Twitter as well. Like I don't tweet much, but I'll always answer. And again, if you just message me if you don't want to do a public message or anything.
And go ahead and give your Twitter handle.
Yeah, it's just my name, so it's Graham Mendick.
Perfect. And we'll put a link to that in the show notes as well.
Nice one, thanks.
All right, thanks a lot, Graham. That was awesome. Let's move into the weird bugs part of the show. Who here has a weird bug that they want to talk about?
Well, it's not really a weird bug, but it's a hopefully relatable developer experience of spending a couple of days banging your head against something and then realizing it was something really simple. I spent a couple of days trying to figure out why my React build was not optimized for production. We were theoretically minifying it, doing all the things, but the ops team was like, the bundle is really huge, the performance is really bad, and I couldn't figure out why. And it took 2 days later, I realized that we were outputting it to a different file name than the one that they were expecting. And by switching to the correct file name, they saved about 5 megabytes maybe of bundle size. So
wasn't it they were using index.js?
Yeah, they were pointing to index. They were pointing to index.js, and we were minifying to index.min.js. So that was a fun discovery.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I can sort of relate in a semi-similar way where we were trying to, actually on that same project, trying to get it to work on Internet Explorer 11 and having a lot of problems. And then realizing that the client had told us 2 months prior, we don't need to support Internet Explorer 11. We spent a day and a half on that. So that was, okay, whoops. Well, at least we don't have to do that. It was going to be a real pain, but they looked at their numbers, the metrics, and there's just not a lot of Internet Explorer.
Always double check your assumptions.
Always.
Anyway.
Cool. So where can people find you? Harris, what's your new Twitter handle?
It's Nomadic Spoon, NOMADSPOON. Oh, sorry.
I think you forgot the IC
there.
Nomad Spoon.
Nomad Spoon.
Nomad Spoon.
Try again.
That's someone else.
Yeah. Do not follow Nomad Spoon.
You might get better content. Robin, where can people find you? I'm
at Robin_Hines with an E at the end.
And I'm Jamin at Jamin Holmgren on Twitter. You can find Graham at Graham Mendick on Twitter. As always, thanks to our producer and editor, Todd Worth, our transcript and release coordinator, Jed Bartoski, and our social media coordinator, Missy Warren. Thanks to our sponsor, Infinite Red. Check them out at infinite.red/React Native. A special thanks to all of you listening today. make sure to subscribe if you haven't. We're on all of the major podcasting platforms. And go tell a friend if you like what you hear. We want to get the word out about our new podcast that we're trying to do a good job on. See you all next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.